All right, today we're going to talk about catching more fish, trout in rivers. This is part one about covering water. You have to understand the windows of opportunity. These windows can be dictated by time. When I say time, I don't mean time as in what time of the day. I mean, you have to understand that there's a limited amount of time that the fish will be feeding or that your chances of catching active fish is greatest. That could be an hour, that could be 2 hours, or it could be all day, but you have to plan accordingly. Know that you're against the clock. For light, I would be looking at cloud cover. It's generally difficult to catch fish when the sun is at its highest. One thing that I've been playing around with is shadows. So where you are in the river versus where the sun is, where the canyon wall is, or the trees are. You can get into some great fishing at unconventional hours if you play the shadows correctly. The fish are more likely to feed when the sun isn't directly shining on them. For temperature, the air temperature is important during the summer and winter. During the summertime, when the air temperature gets too high, there's no chance of catching a fish. And vice versa, in the wintertime, when the air temperature is too low, there's no chance of catching a fish. And how the water temperature is impacted by the air temperature is important because the water temperature will dictate the insect activity. Obviously, you want to be fishing at a time when the insects are most active. If you're chasing a hatch or if you know they're feeding on a specific bug, then that water temperature is going to be what you look at. Time of the day is also very important for insect activity. Understanding the opportunity of flow. If you're fishing a tailwater specifically, many departments of water management release water at a certain amount of time. And whether you want to be fishing then or after or before, understanding the river flow is important. You should always be checking the flow. Frankly, it would be a big waste of time to go fishing without checking the flow. If you're fishing 12 months out of the year, I think most people would say fall is the best season. The weather is stable, and usually the dropping temperature activates feeding behavior. And you're fishing in the winter, the window of opportunity could just be 2 hours, from 10 to noon or from noon to 2. And then there's no point in fishing because it's very unlikely you're going to catch a fish. But that just depends on where you are. Understanding your water and when people are most likely to be on it, what the crowds are like on the weekends, what time people get off work, things like that, parking. In my opinion, fishing pressure is the number one variable of whether you catch a fish or not. If you know a lot of people are on the river on a Saturday and you go out on a Sunday, even if the conditions are perfect, it can be a tough day. I'm sure most people have experienced that. So understanding the behavior of the local anglers is extremely important. What water they like to fish, when they fish, etc. When you're deciding what water to fish, you should be considering the more water you cover, the greater chances of you catching a fish are. This is the Poudre River in Colorado. It's a local river, very well known. It flows into the town of Fort Collins, Colorado. And if I were planning a day on this river, I would be looking, what kind of water do I want to fish? I know that in the lower section of the river widens and slows. And then in the higher section of the canyon, it's faster moving water. But throughout the river, there are breaks that can impede your progress. And my goal is to have the longest stretch of good water possible. I noticed there's a parking spot here, but this flat water to me would be very difficult to fish. It gets a little bit better up here. There's some riffles and boulders. This bend might be nice, but then I see there's a obstacle here and that would be difficult to get around. But if I had just a couple hours, maybe I'd choose this little section here. It looks like there's another park off spot there. Moving upriver, you see there's more moving water. That looks good. That looks good. This bend would be very good. And here's another really nice bend here. And there's a nice little parking spot here too. But no, the areas around the parking spots are likely to be fished the hardest. You have to be willing to walk maybe a mile, half a mile back to the car, or start off in the morning walking a mile to give yourself a good chance of covering a lot of good water. You might like to fish slow water because you think it's easier to present, and that water might hold more fish. But the slower the water, the more cautious the fish are, especially in a place that's heavily pressured. If you become comfortable fishing faster water, you will catch more fish. The fish are more aggressive, take more chances. It makes life a whole lot easier. In my experience, a lot of anglers will skip riffles and they'll skip pocket water, ironically, because they think it's too time consuming. They don't like their chances. They want to focus on the big pools where they're confident that there are fish. And as I've progressed in fly fishing, I've learned that riffles and pocket water, that's where you can really save a day. And sometimes it's the only water that hasn't been stepped on. So fish those riffles, fish those pockets. How many casts you should take in a certain spot? I think I'm guilty of not taking enough. What's really helped me though is understanding that I'm going to leave fish behind. Coming to grips with that, I think, has made me a better angler. The more you're casting on a spot, the more you're disturbing the spot, the lower chances of you getting that fish are, especially if it's slow water, they can see the fly line moving above in the air. So for me, 5, 6 drifts is a lot. I've ingrained in myself to just keep moving and cover more water. I've seen a lot of anglers sit on a fish. They can see it and they'll keep casting at it. And in my opinion, if you can't move it, if it isn't reacting to your fly and you've changed your fly and it isn't reacting, it's very unlikely you're going to catch that fish. And you got to give credit where credit's due. Let the fish win. Moving in a river, I think, sets the really good anglers apart. Watching them, how they step, how they position. Positioning for the first cast, I think, is so important. If you're in the wrong position, you make that cast and you mess up the drift, then you burn the hole or you burn that spot. So try to get as close as possible. And that means don't have so much fly line out. There might be certain times when you do have to make a long cast, but the longer cast you make in a river, the more difficult it is to manage the line. And then if a fish does strike, the more difficult it is to set the hook. Something I've seen really good anglers do is they don't get in the water if they don't have to. And that's something I've been trying to do more. Slow approach, position yourself well, and make a good first cast. People who tightline or Euro nymph, they know how to work water really well. Coupled with the technique is them covering the water systematically. Couple casts here, step up, couple casts here, step up. They're efficient. They're not standing in one spot for too long. And they keep searching new water, new water, new water. So try Euro nymphing, or at least understand the principle of it, and it'll make you a better trout fisherman.